Hello there, ladies and gentlemen. Ambrose Blofield back here again from the Sales Mastery Company, here to teach you how to create the right sales team structure. And in particular, I'm going to talk to you about 3 of the most common mistakes made when a business owner or a sales director or sales manager puts together their team structure. Let's jump straight into it. If you do not have this workbook in front of you right now, please send an email to admin@salesmasterycompany.com and request the right sales team structure workbook, and we'll get you a copy. But now I've got your attention for the next 10 or 15 minutes. Let me just guide you through it. Whether you're driving in the car, you've sat down, you grabbed yourself a sandwich, let's have a chat about the right sales team structure, because it's going to go a long way to your success. There's a welcome message on the second page of the workbook, but essentially, if we go straight to the third page of the workbook, I want to teach you how to maximize your sales success by getting the right people on the right seats in the right structure. So again, right people means aligned to the core values and principles, the right work ethics and the work morale of the team that you want. Likewise, right seats, understanding what seats you need and understanding who suits which seats. You can teach an old dog new tricks. I've done that many, many times. Not that I've taught dogs, but I've taught humans. And I know the saying was referencing humans when they said that. Yes, people can learn. François Mitterrand, when I was studying in France, was the president of France at 81 years old, having failed to become president 3 times before. I think he's one of the most significant positions any political leader can have, because generally the French president has a huge amount of power, even to the point of dissolving parliament. And he was doing it in his 80s with cancer that he'd been suffering from for 20 or 25 years at that particular point. So again, you can teach somebody to do a new role. Absolutely. He was learning in the 70s and 80s. You can do a lot there. Likewise, I want to reduce your wasted time as a manager. That's something I'm trying to protect you from today's subject, is trying to put the wrong effort into the wrong people, or having to put huge amounts of effort into the wrong people or in the wrong seats. So we want to get the right structure, we want to get the right people in the right seats, and we want to have the right people who join our company. Now, a traditional mode was, of course, you have a GM or a CEO, and then you have the different divisions. And I've done it in a usual flowing order of a business, although customer service these days might sit under sales or it might sit under operations. But essentially, a business flows from marketing to sales to customer service, or customer service underneath sales or operations. And then likewise, then there's operations. Then, of course, there's finance and admin and systems and IT and leadership and everything else that might flow from that. But put really simply, that's the basic structure. The most common structure we're seeing in business-to-business selling, remembering 99% of our customers sell B2B as opposed to business to consumer. They're not out there in retail or hospitality industries. They might well sell into retail businesses or sell into hospitality businesses, such as furniture or lighting or carpeting or flooring. But the reality is our clients are B2B. They'll have a manager leading a sales team, whether it's called a sales manager, sales director, sales and marketing manager, if marketing sits within it. And typically they'll have an internal and an external team. Now, not simply because of the book, The Machine from Justin Roth-Marsh. A lot of people have got very excited about sales process engineering, or trying to structure your sales team in a way that produces great results. That was something that people did in the operational facilities of factories 100, 150 years ago. So it's definitely not new. I wouldn't say it's exclusively because of that, but I think it's an excellent read. It's a really good principle to challenge yourselves with. The key is, how do we apply it? And I'll talk about mistakes shortly. But in essence, usually people these days will have an external team that focuses on business development. So you might have 1 or 2 business development managers, but nowadays we'll have a support person beneath them, or a support person beneath 2 or 3 people. Now, that will partly come down to your budget. It'll partly come down to the complexity of your industry. So whether we're talking a 1-for-1 support person to a person on the road, or a 1-to-3 or 1-to-2, the ratio you'll have to figure out yourself, doing your maths, doing your numbers, understanding how people spend their time, which is why time management analysis is an important thing to do. We often get people to go through a bit of a time audit to analyze what they've done before we start coaching them and working with them. So we want to know where they're wasting time. Statistically, most of the research, I think Harris Interactive did this research 10 years ago and identified that most people spend 50% of their time not doing things that are going to help us achieve our overall company or team objective. That's quite scary. That means half of people's time and half of their wages are completely wasted and don't produce any value. Then, of course, if you've got an external BDM team, You've probably got some complex relationships where you might have to have an external account management team. Now, sometimes those roles might be merged. It would be external as a territory manager. They do BDM work for business development, and they do account management work. Some teams these days are starting to split them. Why? Because personality suits certain things, and I'll talk about that shortly. Likewise, if you've got that as an external team, the bits that people really focus on when they think about sales process engineering is honing into the internal team. So we might have an internal business development team. We used to refer to them as telesales people or telemarketers. They might sit close to your marketing team these days as well. They might need support as well, because it might be you want them to be proactive, and then you want someone else to deal with the reactive stuff or the tidy up or the admin that follows. Likewise, an internal team for account management. That wasn't something looked at 15, 20 years ago. We often assumed only territory managers could call customers. But that third tier of customers, if you have them ranked as A, B, and C, or gold, silver, and bronze, that third tier of bronze or C grade customers are perfectly happy to talk to your internal team. And of course, your internal team typically draw less of a wage, and we don't have to supply them with a car and an on-the-road laptop computer. They can have a desktop, which is half the price. And of course, you can get through a lot of calls in an hour. So you can certainly crank up your volume of activity. Likewise, there might be that reactive side in this day and age where customer service, I see 8 times out of 10 sitting within a sales team, and probably 2 times out of 10 sitting within an operational team in this day and age. If they're not sitting as a standalone, which is very rare these days, they often sit under sales. So there might be an internal customer service team that purely focuses on inbound 100% of the time. Maybe you do, maybe you don't have that fifth element, but I wanted to talk it through it. So let's go to the areas I see people getting it wrong. They might go and study the machine and sales process engineering, or they go and do an MBA, or they go do some study or leadership course, and they come back and say, I know how to structure my team. The question is the team structure you're implementing workable within the team you've got? Now, if you turn around and say, doesn't matter, build it and they'll come. Again, that saying was not applied to building a sales team specifically. I've spent 19 years analyzing thousands of sales teams, and I can guarantee you this. Often we implement a brand new structure, which in theory, academically could work, but then we try to force it upon the team, and we go through 2 to 3 years of what sometimes described to me by the salespeople themselves as a living hell. Somebody who believes it's anywhere close to being a hell is not a motivated person, which means you, the business owner or sales manager, are not maximizing their contribution and their success, which means there's a huge amount of stress on everyone else to perform because that person's underperforming. But more importantly, for you as a leader, an incredible amount of stress put on your shoulders because you're trying to squeeze a round peg into a square hole that doesn't work, or a square peg into a round hole that doesn't work. You've got to work with your team. You've got to engage your team. Now, maybe you just inherited recently, you were the best salesperson, congratulations, you got promoted, and like 80% of sales managers, you got promoted from the floor into the team leader role. Sadly, the team's just lost its best salesperson, which is never good for results in the short term, but hopefully you can impart those great skills and knowledge that you've got into others. In saying that, there are some challenges, which is why we have some sales manager programs. The right seats. Accept the fact that you, like everybody else, suit different roles more or less easily. That does not mean you can't learn a new role. It also doesn't mean if you've got a small sales team, you can't chop and change your role from one day to the next, even from 1 hour to the next. But the reality is tall people make better basketballers and short people make better jockeys in the Grand National in the UK. The reality here is we are better suited to different roles. We're all wonderfully and beautifully made the way we are, but some things come more easily. And that is based around that personality, which is correctly referred to as behavioral profile. It also comes from our competences. It also comes from our knowledge. It also comes from our experiences. And it also comes from how we impact those around us. Certain people just don't get along. They shouldn't work together. If you've got the structure on the previous page, but the sales support role doesn't suit the person externally, then that's going to under-support that role, which means both people are going to be demoralized. So when we're talking about personalities or behavioral profiles, understand clearly that whatever tool you use, whether it's a Myers-Briggs or a Herman Institute, we happen to use extended DISC, which is described as DISC profiling on steroids. It's paid, it comes out of Finland, and it fundamentally works. It also differentiates between people's conscious profiles and their unconscious profiles. When you start to understand people's personalities, you start to realize there are those profiles that suit hunting better than others. So they'll need less effort put put into their motivation because they're self-motivated to do it. There are members of your team who are very good and very patient and very understanding and very capable at selling something technical. That literally is the opposite personality to somebody who loves hunting for new business. There are some people in your team that love going to trade shows and events, normally that warm, bubbly personality. So let them do a lot of that. Try to adapt the person to the role, absolutely, but try to adapt the role to the person, absolutely, as well. Life's like a dance, particularly in a sales team itself. You're trying to get the most out of everybody around you. So understanding the profile of people, and at the very least, if you don't want to pay to profile your team, sit down with them and ask them, what do you like about your role? And get a long list of them. And I bet you those are the things they're mostly good at and want to be encouraged to do more of. And ask them, which parts of the role do you not like so much? Now, I'm not saying take everything off them and allow them to stagnate and not learn and grow, but I'm saying don't let them spend 40 hours a week doing something they don't like at all, because then you have to put a huge amount of effort into motivating them, holding them accountable, and they have to have self-accountability and self-motivation on something they don't necessarily want to perfect. All of us in life have to tidy our desk and iron our shirts and dresses, or likewise tidy up after ourselves. That's part of life. It's part of being part of a community, part of a family, or in a work environment. But at the end of the day, if you want to get the most out of your team, get them into the right seats, because they're going to be more motivated by themselves. You won't have to work as hard. Likewise, you can measure people's skills or competences. So when we talk competence, we're talking skill. Again, competence is the right terminology. Skill is an appropriate word to use in alternative for that. And you can do that in a number of ways. Spending time in the field, or if they're an internal team, sitting beside them at their work and observing them regularly. I really mean that, regularly, to assess their skills and confidence. Number two, having members that they assess each other is a really, really important thing as well. Peer-to-peer, they'll spot things that you don't necessarily do, and I apologize for the 2 typos in this video. Likewise, having them self-assess using an independent tool is also a way to do that. And what we find is, like an external examination, people tend to trust its score because it's deemed to be independent. So you can assess your team, you can help them assess each other, and likewise you can have them paid to be assessed otherwise. All 3 are worthwhile things. I typically say to people, try to use all 3 if possible. If you only want to use 2 out of those 3, be my guest. But if you want to understand your team and understand the strengths you've got, then of course you're going to advance a lot more. Aristotle, who was relatively a wise man over 2,000 years ago, said, to know thyself is the beginning of all wisdom. All wisdom. That was a big claim from someone who's quite philosophical and quite intelligent in his era. So let's think about it. To know thyself. Well, I'm going to say it to you. To know thy team is the beginning of all wisdom, because once you understand what you've got, you can try to do the best you can. I always think of a team in sales as you've got all these great ingredients, you've got to bake the cake as best as you can as a sales leader. So I strongly recommend you understand the team's personalities. One quick word of warning: if you do a free tool online, statistically it will be inaccurate 25 to 30% of the time, because a free tool online only trials and understands and assesses somebody's conscious profile as opposed to the unconscious profile. And what I mean by that is the unconscious profile is the real person. The conscious profile is how they think they should be in a work environment. So if you're only assessing people's conscious profile, 25 to 30% of the time, it's different to their real natural style or self. That's why it's wrong. You'll be right most of the time, but again, you want to know yourself, not guess your team. Okay, number 2, you need to understand this is your responsibility. What levels of performance do I need my team to perform in all the different parts of their role? Their time management, their KPIs, their calling, the quality of meetings, their presentation, and all the things such as how they deal with money, how they sell money, how they follow the sales process, how they control conversations, how they bounce back when they lose and they fail and they struggle and they lose again. How do they bounce back from failure? Can they keep an emotional distance, or do they go through an emotional roller coaster every time they're with a customer? All of those things you need to analyze. What performance levels do you want people to be at? Whether you score them out of 10 or you just go high, medium, or low, not every role needs to be there. And then finally, of course, you want to assess people against those roles using a tool or train and coach them to improve what they've done. Now, if you want some help moving forward, feel free to sign up and join our amazing sales academy where we interact week to week. Likewise, if you want to use one of our profiling tools for people's personalities or to assess them with their competence, then you can click on the link there and there's a discount for you to get access to that so you can know your team and really lead them into long-term success. Last thing for me to say is I strongly recommend you talk to your team about the structure they're part of or the structure you'd like them to be part of. Then you assess them. Don't stop that assessment. Assessment is not judgment. It's about finding ways to get them to raise their performance levels and achieve a lot of success moving forward. I've been Ambrose Blofield. We're the Sales Mastery Company. And as always, be sure to take action.